This video is going to be about the formation of the granitoids, the initial granite that made the islands that eventually came together to form the continents. And we're also going to talk about the pegmatites that are formed in this granite, and we'll touch upon the broader story of mineral evolution stage 4, which is occurring throughout this granitoid pegmatite process. Before we jump into it, like the video and subscribe if big history is for you. Early in Earth's history, there were no continents. Instead, Earth was reddish-black as it turned from molten ball to basalt-covered crust, and soon enough it turned blue as volcanoes expelled gaseous water that would condense and fall to create the oceans. But just as before, when the first crust formed out of peridotite, and it was melted partially from underneath and the lighter basalt formed from the resulting melt, and the basalt rose up towards the surface, so too now, when the basalt covers the Earth. The magma beneath heated the basalt until it reached 1700 degrees Fahrenheit, at which point it began to melt. The partial melt of basalt is less dense than basalt is, by about 10%, and it makes its way towards the surface and freezes out. The resulting rock type is granite, and these granite mountain islands would come to form the cores of the continents. Let's take a closer look at the granite that's actually coming out over here. Granite's made up of four main components. They are 1. Feldspars. The feldspars are aluminosilicates with differing amounts of sodium and or potassium. They give a grayish-white color to granites. Second, there's quartz, which are clear crystals of silicon dioxide. Third, a couple of percent are iron-bearing minerals, found in 1. Pyroxene grains, 2. mica flakes, and 3. amphibole crystals. And lastly, 4, there are a smattering of smaller bits of minerals that incorporate rarer elements. One example of such a mineral is zirconium, which incorporates the relatively rare mineral zircon. Back to the rising granite. This granite rises up and forms local mountains of granite. These relatively small granite islands are swept with waves, which turn their feldspars and their quartzes into thin sandy beaches along their shores. And these lone islands dot the globe, along with the lone basaltic volcanic peak islands. And by the time we reach 3.5 billion years ago, islands of granite may have covered as much as 5% of the globe. But that's it. No massive land masses existed. That'll happen across time, but for now, 3.5 billion years ago, we're left with islands of granite and basalt and a worldwide ocean. With the creation of all this granite, we leave the world of stage 3 of mineral evolution and we enter stage 4 of mineral evolution, jumping from 500 to 1,000 mineral types. Aside from the new minerals formed in the granite, there are many elements that had been concentrated in the melt that the granite formed from, because these elements hadn't had an available place in the minerals that had crystallized prior. These special concentrations form the pegmatites, which are igneous rocks with large crystals that form towards the end of the cooling process of the melt which they form from. The grains of these crystals are at a minimum ½ an inch and often quite larger. Among them are topaz, the tourmaline group, aquamarine, there's quartz and feldspar without certain inclusions, and then there are more extreme cases of element concentration. Beryllium, which makes up 3 atoms per million in the Earth's crust, concentrated to more than 100 part per million ratio, and form the mineral beryl. Tin and uranium also checked in with their own minerals. Niobium and tantalum, which compose less than 1 part per million in the crust, came into their own minerals as well. Lithium multiplied by 100 and more from its 20 parts per million in the crust and forms spodumene, lepidolite, and other new mineral types. Phosphorus makes apatite, boron makes its own minerals as well, and cesium has the wildest story, coming from a concentration of 2 parts per million in the crust to 40,000 parts per million and more to form pollucite. Stage 4 brings us up to 1,000 minerals, which is more than 20% of all the known minerals that exist now, and is a far cry from the 12 minerals that existed as the solar system began to be born, and that exist in all the nebulae that will come to form solar systems as well.